was the plan all along that you were going to buy a small business, or was it like, we'll get to Pennsylvania and maybe I'll take a job or buy more real estate, or was it, I'm going to buy a business?
I was keeping my options open. Like I did interview for one possible position. That was kind of like DOD contractor related. It would have me traveling a lot, but basically living wherever I wanted to. But really from the beginning, the goal was to own a small business. And I started Strong Point, in 2018 when I first bought that apartment building. And, there was a thought, is like, hey, do I double down on this and become like a real estate GP? I didn't feel great about that. I'm a novice when it comes to real estate, man. No one should be giving me their money to invest in like multifamily value add in North Carolina.
I would.
So
based on those returns, you do better than some people that do it full time.
Yeah. But it just didn't seem like a fit for me. And when I really thought about like what I was good at and what I enjoyed, small business just made sense, right? I wanted to be, some experiences in the Marine Corps, both as a platoon commander and as that operations officer, showed me that I was most satisfied and at my best when I was on a small team. Like in a remote, far-flung location, or like deep forward in a zone, and like basically just responsible for like figuring it the fuck out. Like no one's coming to save you. You have to sustain yourself. You have to protect yourself. You have to go on the offense and decide when that's appropriate. And you've got men and their lives and their morale in your hands, right? So, that's just like intoxicating, honestly. So when I thought about like, how do I recreate that outside of the military? Because I think a lot of guys get it wrong, right? They're like, oh, I can only catch these thrills in the military, right? And the reality is that like small business ownership is like pretty high stakes, man. So that's basically like the self-reflection that I was having, 18 months ago, 24 months ago, which then led me to really try to dive in and learn everything I could about like what I needed to know about small business.
Yep. Well, we're going to dive in. We're going to spend the next probably 30 minutes of this episode on the plumbing journey, buying the business. And then we're going to really dial in how leadership and small teams, how you think about it. But so let's just do a master class on how a guy with no experience buying and running even a small business, maybe I shouldn't say no experience, you were in the military, but does it. So how did you source this deal? Were you looking online? Were you like, how did this deal become, and how many did you look at along the way?
Yeah. So I had spent, a considerable amount of like brain power in through 2019 into 2020, looking at a bunch of deals with no interest in taking them down. Cause I didn't know where I was going to move to, didn't know where I was going to live, wasn't sure about what industry I was interested in. But just like getting those reps, right? And like a lot of the things that I applied in my search for a business, I had kind of learned in my search for real estate, right? So just like getting those reps, man, getting like looking at the P&L, looking at the location, looking at the demographics, right? Like you would for real estate. Same kind of thing applied for small business. So I was just getting like a look, peering into all these small businesses through their SIMs over the course of a year. And once I finally found out I was going to Pennsylvania, which was like mid-March, it was actually just about this time last year.
Middle of COVID, like right as COVID is starting to break out.
Seriously. Absolutely.
Perfect timing.
COVID had hit like a week before we found out we were moving to PA. So I start narrowing my search to Pennsylvania, and I start getting actually serious about the search, right? And now I'm voicing to brokers my my capacity to close and my commitment. And I had an experience in real estate when I was looking for another deal. My second deal, I had found like a really kind of rundown, mismanaged apartment building on really great real estate in downtown Winston-Salem, North Carolina, where my wife was living and where we kind of thought we were going to end up. And I did direct outreach to the seller, found out he wanted to sell. He was out of state, but then I had to like chase his ass down for a year. Right. And we're having great conversations every month. And ultimately I lose the deal. Because basically I like wrote up an LOI and his agent shopped it around to like people she knew in the area, which was frustrating. So had like a nasty taste in my mouth from that. And that kind of turned me off to direct outreach for a little bit. So I approached my business search with that mindset, and I basically went straight brokered deals. And part of it was that my timeline was I had a timeline crunch. I didn't want to go. I'm not a search fund investor backed guy, so I didn't have like 2 years of runway to just like dedicate to the search itself. So I needed like certainty of closing on the seller's end. And for me, a broker deal, more likely provides that. So a lot of it was online search. I mean, we're talking biz, buy, sell, all that stuff. But again, this is a real estate learning for me, was that I saw a lot of success in going on a site like Biz Buy Sell, looking at the listings for that particular area. And instead of just pursuing those listings, looking at who was listing those listings and then reaching out to them, like cold outreach to them, with my experience, with my capacity to close, with my interest in that specific company and what my like deal criteria was and what my geography was, and then deals started coming to me, which is pretty nice. I ended up pursuing like going pretty deep on a home staging service company in Philadelphia, and I got beat to the LOI. Like literally had an LOI written up in hand. I had driven up from Virginia. I was like staying with my parents. And because they lived near Philly, and I was going to go into Philly and view the warehouse, do a walking tour with a broker on Saturday, and hand him the LOI. And like I had the whole movie scene playing in my head, it was going to be awesome. Right. And then Friday morning, I get a call. Hey, thanks for driving up here, but we just went under LOI with somebody else. Fuck. So I'm like, all right, man, like, like what else you got?
Yeah.
And that broker he had 3 businesses that he thought I'd be interested in. And I only remember 2 of them. One was a landscaping company and one was a plumbing company. I actually, when I was waiting to join active duty, I graduated college, commissioned as a Marine officer, but I got like stovepiped waiting to go active duty. I spent some of that time, about 6 months of that time, as a plumber's helper, and like got like a really cool insight into small business through that. So I had like somewhat of a love for plumbing and an understanding of the opportunity in that space. And so I bid on the plumbing, and the plumbing company is in New Jersey. It's about 3.5 hours away from where I ultimately moved with my wife, which obviously is like less than ideal for small business operations. Now I happen to have my best friend from college, fellow engineer, super savvy, smart, from a blue collar, hardworking family, straight shooter guy, lives right down the street from the business. And he and I had stayed in touch, throughout like, our 20s, and like particularly like having like business related conversations around the things I was doing in real estate. So he was kind of primed. I hit him up like, hey man, there seems to be a good opportunity like right in your backyard. Would you be interested in joining me on this? Because honestly, I didn't feel great about like taking it on myself and living 3.5 hours away. He was in. So I drove up, I met with him, and a good friend of his and an acquaintance of mine, me and this other guy, had been in TJ's, my partner's name, in TJ's wedding that year. We met with him, and he's a plumber. And in New Jersey, you have to, in order to be a legal plumbing company, you have to have 10% of the company owned minimum by a licensed master plumber in the state. Pretty serious barrier to entry there, but we happen to have a guy like teed up. Okay, great. We're like in the money. So sit down with this guy, meet him, like tell him, meet him for the second time, tell him, kind of like the vision, what we got going on. He doesn't have the personal capital to get involved. So, we're going to stake him. Like, he's going to have a job with us, and he's going to have 10% ownership of the company for nothing in other than his time. Pretty sweet deal. I felt pretty good about it. He felt pretty good about it. We all signed the LOI, and it gets accepted a few days later. And then we got about 30 days of due diligence. And now this is like the first week of May of 2020. And I took my uniform off for the last time, basically like Memorial Day weekend. So like, I'm like 3.5 weeks away from leaving the Marine Corps, and I just got this LOI accepted. Like, hell yeah. Right. And we're about a week into due diligence, and our plumber backs out. Basically, he calls me up, and he's like, "Hey, I'm out. I want to own 100% of my own company." I'm like,
that ain't
right,
gonna
man,
work.
Well, good luck with that. Like, I don't know what your plan is, but good luck. That was like a real kick in the nuts, right? Like serious, like existential crisis on the deal at that point. I'm still in Virginia, like trying to wrap things up with the Marine Corps. I'm like running ragged, like working to pass things off down there. And trying to like negotiate my exit from the DOD, which is like a feat in itself. So, and then this bomb gets dropped on us. So we basically, now we have to launch a parallel search for a plumber. And now we're looking at like going into this deal with a plumber we don't know, like, again, like not optimal. Right. So, I'm like tapping my network back in New Jersey. My partner's doing the same, hey, who knows a plumber? Does anyone know a plumber? And we're like, I'm driving up on the weekends. I'm like holding interviews, phone interviews, from down in Virginia, and due diligence is going to be up June 10th. And we're going to have like, it was like 30 grand was going to go hard on June 10th. So like seriously starting to feel the sweat. We enter June, we still don't have a plumber. June 6th, it was a Saturday. And it, it's COVID and it's up in New Jersey. So like things were like seriously locked down. Literally like meet this guy. His name's Rich too. Meet this guy like in a park. It was like I was certain that like the cops are going to show up and think we were doing a drug deal. But me and my partner meet this guy
You're like, no,
under like a tree.
We're just doing
in
a
the
plumbing
park.
deal.
Yeah. Like get to know him. What's he about? We kind of like sell ourselves to him. He's in. And like with the understanding of that, like he was basically going to let us hang his license on the wall. He wasn't going to be actively involved. He's going to be basically like a consultant. And he'd get 10% of net profit, for it. Pretty sweet deal for him too. And he worked full time. He was in the union. And so we shake hands right there under the tree. We get like copies of his plumbing license. He fills out like a form that the bank needed for his like trade experience, and we're off to the races. It was like bananas, right? Crazy. Like I'm out of my mind for doing it, honestly. But we made it work. And we get through due diligence. There's really no red flags, at least no red flags that we didn't expect. This is a small mom and pop operation, like literally mom and pop operation. The owner and his wife ran it and split. Like he was basically a technician. He was a plumber that happened to own the business, and his wife was the office administrator, and his son did some administrative tasks around the office as well. And it had 2 plumbers. So when you think about like what I bought, it wasn't much. I mean, I bought 4 trucks, 2 plumbers, and no corporate infrastructure at all. Right. Like the wife bounced on like day 5, basically. And like every single business function fell on my lap on day 1. And all sorts of, hijinks ensued. But yeah, basically, I mean, this is a small company. I mean, the income statement, the cash flow statement, balance sheet, all pretty like straightforward. There wasn't like a whole lot of like skeletons in the closet. And we had a pretty good feel about what we were looking at. So we, once due diligence was up, or during due diligence, we had engaged a local regional bank with a solid SBA department, and started working on an SBA 7A loan, right? And SBA 7A allows you to pull up to 90% of the purchase price in a government-backed note and put down 10%. And they'll also, the SBA also rolls in to the note closing costs and working capital. So like it's a pretty sweet little product. And allowed us to walk into the deal outside of the 10% down that we put in. Didn't have to worry about closing costs at all, like attorney's fees, CPA fees, valuation fees, and stepped into the business with about 80 grand in the checking account to be able to run the operation. So
when you met that broker to start the search, did they have to pre-qualify you? Like, was there something that you had to say, like, I'm good for this, kind of prove yourself, or because the business was so small and you had a real estate track record, that was good enough? Or did you have to show proof to them that you were the real deal?
Yeah. They required like a personal financial statement essentially. And a resume. So I definitely played up the real estate experience, and the real estate helped me have like surprisingly high, for anyone like looking at my resume, surprisingly high, like, personal balance sheet, which helped like, kind of assuage any concerns that the broker would have. But yeah, we had to, basically the broker gave me a colonoscopy before you would take me seriously.
What deal terms mattered to the seller when you were putting together that LOI? Like, was it just price? Was it time to close? Was there anything in that LOI that was surprising to you that mattered to get it under contract?
Yeah. So, I had, learned through real estate and through my small business, self-education, all of the ways you can kind of like manipulate terms and really get creative and all that stuff. And I was excited to do that on this deal. And I submitted my first offer, and it had like an earn out in there and a seller note. And the broker basically told me, like, get the fuck out. Like, don't like burn this. I don't ever want to see this again. So time to close was important. And the fact that we were going to be, that I was going to jump in full time and not like try to consider this an absentee owned business was important. But honestly, price and terms, they were completely rigid, like the most rigid I've ever seen. It was just, this is the price. We are not willing to negotiate even $1. And you're gonna put your 10% down. You're gonna get an SBA loan, or you're gonna go try somebody else. It's like, okay. I mean, in reality, like I was trying to like squeeze the juice and like out of the deal and like really work it to my benefit. But the reality was, like, I got the deal for like 2.2x earnings. I mean, it was a smoking hot deal, and it had a ton of upside available, that you could easily see on the income statement. So, so I was happy to pay full price for it.
So how long was the close? Was it like 30-day look, 30-day close? How long from LOI to closing?
It was 30-day look, 60-day close. And then it ended up being closer to 30-day look, 120-day close. But that was mostly on the seller's end. They had some like lines of credit and things outstanding that like dropped on, at the 11th hour that like hadn't been settled, and like kept pushing closing. The bank needed some things. So, we were supposed to close August 12th, and we ended up not closing until September 2nd. And we got that under LOI like the first week of May.
Okay. What mattered to you during due diligence? Like what did you need besides what you saw in the sim that you wanted to confirm that got you comfortable with the deal?
Yeah, I wanted a strong understanding, and I've looked at a lot of plumbing and HVAC deals now, and it's almost always obscure or opaque. Is like what labor cost belongs to which employees or which like groups of employees, right? So I was particularly interested in how much are the technicians being paid and how much are they producing. And like that line item is just wages in OpEx on a lot of these sims. And you don't know like how many helpers or installers or managers or customer service reps or whatever is in there. So and without that, you have a hard time judging like what the actual performance of the producing assets, which are your technicians, right? So that was a big part of it. And then, part of it was making sure there was nothing like legal outstanding, particularly for like a home service company that does, critical repairs. You want to make sure they don't have like, liens or lawsuits against them for something that they've messed up or warranties that they haven't adhered to or things like that. So really it was like, what's my, honestly, like I was good with the value that was going in. Like I wasn't trying to, I wasn't looking for reasons to blow up the deal over a couple like bips of return, like at 2x earnings, like we were just fine there. And I see a lot of like search fund guys do that, where one line item is less than ideal. And they're like, no, I'm walking away from the deal at the 11th hour. God damn, man. So didn't have any problems there. I mean, the fundamentals of the business I was happy with. But really I was just looking for downside protection, like how can this like really explode in my face? Is there any fraud going on? And when we checked those boxes, we were happy to move forward.
Yeah. How long does it take to get an SBA loan approved? And you went to, was it just like a regional bank that had an SBA arm, or was it an SBA? That's all they do is those type of loans. And how long did it take to get approved?
Yeah, I went to a regional bank that had a pretty strong SBA arm. And I was pretty happy with that, honestly. And I'm happy that we have that local, like established relationship with them now. It's been helpful since. They've loaned on some of our trucks, and basically, we just have a partner in them. And I'm trying to remember how long it took to get approved. It wasn't long. I think like once we like really got all of our, once we got them everything they needed, and that's no small task. I mean, they asked for quite a bit of paperwork and projections, but the reality is that their like standard for those is pretty low. Like you and I, if someone told us to build out like a 13-week cash flow projection, like, we would run that to ground. We would like really fucking do that. And it would look legit, but they don't really need anything. Or what I mean is like they don't really QC any of the stuff you send them. It's all like checks in the box, honestly. So it wasn't that hard to get them what they needed. And I think like probably after after they had everything they needed, it might've been 14 days for approval.
Yeah. So you get approved, 10% down. The seller was it agreed that the seller was going to take their cash at closing and they were going to ride off into the sunset? Or was there an agreement that they would stay on and consult or work in the business a little bit after? I know the wife bailed after 5 days. What about the husband?
Yeah. So the agreement was that the wife and the husband were going to be full-time unpaid for 3 months. And that just kind of like quickly fell apart. And I think that's the story for a lot of guys in this racket. From what I understand. So this certainly was the case for us. Like, you know, the wife was basically like, okay, you know, like it was just like kind of every day. She's like, hey, do you need me for anything? And I'm like, I don't know. Do I need you for anything? You know, help me out here. So after a while, or not really after a while, like literally like the second week of taking over, it was like, hey, look, why don't you just like cut bait, hang out at home, do what you got to do. I'll call you if I need you. Tom, the owner, the seller, was more involved. I mean, you know, like I'm not a plumber by trade. I have like very little plumbing experience. So he was helpful in like establishing vendor relationships, supplier relationships, talking me through, you know, what to think about for estimating work and what like a reasonable expectation is for how long certain jobs are going to take, you know, just kind of like giving me some of the more nuanced takes on plumbing. But even then, after 2 weeks, after 2-3 weeks, it was kind of like he was like sitting across from me at the desk, just kind of tapping his fingers like, hey, you need me to do anything? I was like, no, not really. I mean, if you want to go get lunch with your wife, like maybe we'll talk at the end of the day or something. And then, so really, I mean, after 3 weeks, it was like, I cut him loose. He's my landlord. I rent the property from him that we operate out of. So we still have an ongoing relationship. And he's a good guy. He's rooting for our success and, helps us out when needed. But really it was like, you know, the business was small. And after a couple of weeks, I was like, you know, I think I understand the business as it stood at that point.
Yeah. What was their, you know, you hear right now the boomer generation's going to be retiring. Is that why they were selling? They'd been running it forever. It was time to retire and do that. Or what was their motivation for selling?
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. I mean, he was 57. He was having some health issues, you know, partially because he was beating his body up, you know, crawling under people's crawl spaces and stuff every day. And his wife, unfortunately, was having health issues as well. So it was time for them to hang it up. And they have 2 sons, both grown adult sons. One's like 2 years older than me, and the other's maybe 5 years younger than me. And I'm 30. So their 2 sons weren't interested. And not only that, but you know, Tom had voiced to me as well that his concern was that if he tried to pass it on to his son, because his youngest son's actually in plumbing, he's a plumber. His concern was that if he passed it on to his children, he'd never get out from under the business. He'd always be in it. So he wanted a clean break. He wanted to, like, you know, go fishing and, you know, enjoy his life. So that's how it fell into my hands. Before we get into,
once you closed, now that you've owned the business a while, looking back, is there anything that comes to mind that maybe you wish you had asked during due diligence, or things that when you go to buy your second plumbing company, you will do differently going forward?
Yeah. Yeah. So a couple failures out of the gate for me was, and I had tweeted about this, but one was that I showed up on day one, and I guess I didn't properly like visualize my way through like the day-to-day requirements of the business, of that specific business. And what I mean by that is, like, a plumbing business means like you're inherently distributed operations, right? Like your plumbers are out on the road, on their own. So that requires them to be able to like do simple things like pay for fuel, pay for some supplies, go to Home Depot, right? I I don't know how I missed it, honestly, looking back, but I didn't have any, I had nothing in place for them to be able to do that. So we closed on a Wednesday afternoon. We took over on a Thursday morning, September 3rd. And, typical awkward introduction to the team. We shake some hands. We're in the parking lot. The guys are trying to get in their trucks and go. And the seller, not even 30 seconds after I introduced myself to the team, and the guys were shocked. They didn't know the business was being sold either. So holy shit. And not even 30 seconds later, Tom's like, "Hey, Rich, you got a fuel card or something for Mike needs to gas up his truck for the day." And my eyes got real wide, oh shit. Oh my God. So literally, I had no other choice. I pulled out the corporate debit card that I'd gotten maybe a week prior and handed it to the technician that I just met. And gave him the PIN code just in case he needed it. And I ended up picking up from him at noon. But we're oh man, that's a problem. So me and my partner that night at 10 p.m. we're taking all the trucks and round robbing them, because we have 4 trucks. We're round robbing the trucks to the gas station, a quarter mile away, to fuel them all up. And basically we did that for 2.5 weeks. And it was anytime a guy needed to go to Home Depot, I had to go meet him, right, and check him out. It was it was crazy. And, I no longer had the wife answering the phones. I was answering the phones. Literally, this earpiece I'm wearing right now, I was wearing that all day. Good afternoon. This is Guaranteed Plumbing. This is Rich speaking. How may I help you? And, I'm trying to onboard vendors for us. I'm trying to meet my guys at Home Depot to pay for stuff. And I'm taking calls over the phone. I've got a notebook in my pocket. I'm jotting stuff down. It was absolute chaos. So that's one thing I would have done in due diligence.
Yeah. How do you pay for gas?
And then, another one was payroll. So, pretty industry standard is guys get paid every Friday, right? It's hard to attract guys to your company if you don't do that. So this company, like everybody else, pays every Friday. And I had assumed that was for the week in arrears, like every other business in the United States, right? And so, like I said, we took over on a Thursday morning, and payroll was the next day. So Michelle is the wife who runs the office. I reached out to her on Friday morning as I was driving in. I was just like, "Hey, I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this, but just want to make sure you guys are paying payroll today, right? Because the guys worked for you last week and we're paying them for last week." She's like, "Oh no, we pay for the same week of work. We pay Friday to Thursday and we pay every Friday. So you owe the guys for Wednesday and Thursday, the previous 2 days." My head almost exploded on the way into work. Holy shit, I got to figure out how to pay these guys. I had thought that I wouldn't have to make payroll for basically 10 days after taking over. And I had already worked out with a payroll processor. Gusto is what I use. They're great. That basically if I had everyone's info in the system by Wednesday afternoon, they'd be able to get direct deposit paid on Friday morning. So felt good about it. I was good. But now I'm screwed, right? Now I'm I need to pay these guys today. Not much, but for the last 2 days. And I have no way to do it. So I literally with the calculator on my phone, generated all of their tax liabilities and Social Security, Medicare, all that stuff, FICA, and hand wrote payroll checks that day. I took a picture of one, and I had these payroll slips on loose leaf paper that I ripped out for the guys and gave to them. I took a picture of it because it was so just ridiculous. But that was something I just assumed that pay was a week in arrears.